Today on this episode, we're replacing the outer tie rod end on a Chrysler 300C. Alright, so the tools of the trade today are a torch kit, an impact gun or a 1/2-inch breaker bar, 21mm deep socket, and a 24mm combination box wrench. A hammer and a pickle fork if you need one, it definitely helps. First thing to do is go ahead and jack the car up. Today we have a hoist, but if you don't have one, just jack that baby up with a floor jack. Next, let's go ahead and remove the wheel. Once the wheel is off, use a 24mm wrench and unscrew the 24mm jam nut away from the outer tie rod end. If the jam nut won't budge, use a torch and heat that baby up for a few minutes and try again. You will eventually get the jam nut loose with enough heat. Once loose, screw the jam nut back towards the outer tie rod end until they touch. This step is just to unjam the jam nut, leaving it free. Now, let's get our torch again and heat the 21mm outer tie rod end nut, holding it to the steering knuckle. Heat it up for about a few minutes or so. After that, let's get our 21mm deep socket and impact gun or 1/2-inch breaker bar and remove the 21mm outer tie rod end nut. If it doesn't budge, continue to heat up the nut and area around it a bit more and she will eventually come out. Next, let's get our hammer and pickle fork and use them to separate the outer tie rod end from the steering knuckle. Again, if it won't budge, just keep heating the outer tie rod end a bit more and it'll eventually separate. Once loose, move the steering knuckle away from the outer tie rod end. Now with the outer tie rod end free, let's unscrew the tie rod end from the inner tie rod end while leaving the jam nut in its original position. Super important. Once the tie rod end is unscrewed and the jam nut is left in its original position, let's get our new outer tie rod end and screw it back on. With the jam nut in its original position, the outer tie rod should screw back close to its original length. After the outer tie rod end is screwed back on and into the jam nut, let's get our 24mm wrench and tighten the jam nut to the outer tie rod end and place it back into the steering knuckle. Next, let's get our 21mm nut and fasten the outer tie rod end to the steering knuckle using our impact gun and 21mm deep socket. Now with the outer tie rod end fastened back into the steering knuckle, let's double check that the jam nut is tight up against the tie rod. Finally, install the wheel, clean up, and take her for an alignment. Alright guys, so this took me and Greg about 20 minutes to replace the driver's side outer tie rod end. We highly recommend using a torch kit to heat up the stubborn bolts and nuts. This process will be the same for LX platforms, Dodge Chargers, Magnums, and Challengers between the years of 2005 and 2010. It is so easy to do. If we can do it, you can too. You can also find the instructions in the description as well, and a link to our other videos in the comments. Thanks for watching everyone. If this helped you out, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I would really appreciate it. Take care and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.